All right. So first we'll start off talking a little bit about Columbia Engineering's history. So we were founded in 1864 as the Henry Crum School of Mines, which makes us the third oldest engineering school in the country. And I think a lot of people know Columbia as this pioneer in the arts and the sciences, but we're really the atom was split for the first time in the basement of Pupin Hall. And even the New York City subway system was designed by a graduate of Columbia Engineering. So we really have this rich history of discovery and leadership, and that spirit is definitely still very alive on our campus today. So if we fast forward to today, our engineering school has 9 departments, which together offer 16 majors. You can also choose to supplement your major with a minor. So we have 15 engineering minors and 22 liberal arts minors. If you do take on that liberal arts minor, you're actually going to be getting a minor in Columbia College, which is a really great opportunity. But whether you do that or not, you will definitely still be taking classes with Columbia College students and professors because of our core curriculum, which we'll talk a little bit about later. You'll be living with, dining with, you'll certainly be friends with Columbia College students, so the schools are definitely very interconnected. We have about 1,700 total engineering undergraduates. That comes down to just about 400 class, which is pretty small. That's great because it means you get great access to your faculty. We have a 7-to-1 student-to-faculty ratio in the engineering school, and it also means we have small class size. About 80% of Columbia classes have 20 students or fewer. And even though we're pretty small, we're definitely still very diverse. The first-year class is 50% male, 50% female, which is something that I'm very proud of. And we generally just have students coming from a diverse variety of backgrounds all over the country, all over the world, to come study engineering at Columbia. So now we'll talk a little bit about the courses you would take as a Columbia engineer. So on the left, you'll see our 9 engineering departments listed out. Like I said earlier, together they offer 16 majors. You'll declare your major during the fall of your sophomore year, and that will take about half of your coursework while you're at Columbia. And then on the right, you'll see we have something called the engineering core curriculum. Now, Columbia as a whole is really well known for our core curriculum. If you haven't heard of it, the core is essentially a set of courses that all students take before they graduate. And there's a lot of history and philosophy behind the core curriculum. And we go into much more detail about that during our general information session. So I definitely recommend you attend that if you haven't had the chance. But the core looks a little bit different if you're in Columbia College or Columbia Engineering. So today we'll really just talk about how the core applies to engineering students. So we'll just go through these core classes, starting with the Art of Engineering. So every engineering student will take the Art of Engineering either during their first or second semester on campus. And this is a really great course because you get hands-on engineering experience during your first year at college, which is something that's pretty unique about us amongst our peer institutions. So every week, a different professor comes in and lectures about their department. They talk about the majors the department offers, research opportunities, what your job might look like one day if you chose to major in this department. So that's kind of a great way of narrowing down your choice of major before you declare. And you'll also work on 2 projects throughout the semester. So the first is the Common Project, where you'll work in a group of about 4 or 5 other students. You're challenged to design and build a game of your choice. So my team built Whack-A-Mole. I've heard of people making like mind reading games. There's a lot of Flappy Bird. So there's a lot of great options there. But this is just like a great introduction to coding. It teaches you how to work with some of the machines and tools in our makerspace, like 3D printers and laser cutters. So all around a great project to introduce you to engineering. And then there's the department project, where you work with one of the 9 departments on the left. And you'll get to do whatever project they've selected for the semester. It's always changing, but just as an example, if you did the mechanical engineering department project most years, you'd be working with Professor Mike Massimino, who's a former NASA astronaut. He's been to space a few times, which is really cool. And you'd be building, designing, and launching model rockets with him, which I think is one of the most fun projects that are offered. So again, the Art of Engineering really just gives you that hands-on experience during your first year. Then you'll see we require some introductory courses in calculus, physics, chemistry, computer science. Of course, you go further into these subject areas depending on your major. We also require a semester of economics just to build that business background. And then finally on the list, you'll see our humanities requirements of the core curriculum. Again, we go into much more detail about these courses in our general information session. But generally, it's just important to know that these classes are required for engineers because they build those like critical thinking and discussion and debate skills that are really so important regardless of your major. Columbia Engineering kind of runs on this philosophy that in order to solve the world's problems, you have to understand them first. And I think that's really what these humanities courses in the core teach you how to do. They teach you how to look at society critically, identify the issues we face, and then I think as an engineer, you kind of get to go that next step and try to solve some of those problems, which is really a great opportunity. And then last on the list, you'll see we have a physical education requirement. Don't let that scare or intimidate you. It's not too intimidating. There's a lot of great courses. It's just a way to stay active in a fun way on campus. There's self-paced running, which is really just walking. There's recreation games where you'll play things like kickball and dodgeball, things you play in like middle or high school PE, as well as your traditional things like soccer, basketball, or swimming. I mentioned earlier that your major takes up about half of your coursework. The engineering core curriculum takes up about a fourth of your coursework. So that leaves a fourth that's totally up to you. So you can use that time to take electives and, just areas that interest you. You can add a minor with that 1/4. But I really just want to stress that, even though we have this core curriculum, there's definitely still a lot of room for flexibility in the courses that you take. So we just spent a bit of time talking about the specifics of these courses, but I think it's also really important to look at our philosophy of education as a whole. And for Columbia Engineering, that's engineering for humanity. And all engineering for humanity really means is that as a Columbia engineer, your work should always have a positive impact on humanity and society. So a Columbia engineer is really always considering the ethics of the work they're doing. And like I mentioned earlier, they're using their humanities coursework to better understand the world's problems before they try to solve them. And this isn't just like a motto or something we say. It really is something that comes through in the daily experiences as a Columbia engineer. It comes through in your courses, clubs, the conversations you have with other students on campus. That's really woven into just like the academic environment and spirit. And I think a perfect example of this is a course I took during my first semester, University Writing. It's a core class that was listed on the slide before. And my section was focused on data and society. So we did a lot of readings and wrote a lot about new technologies and how they're affecting the world in positive ways and negative ways. And we read this really great book called Weapons of Math Destruction by Cathy O'Neill. And in this book, O'Neill talks about her experiences working on mathematical models. And these models are supposed to be like very fair, very objective ways of looking at the world and making predictions about the world. But O'Neill talks about how in her experiences, oftentimes she found that these models weren't fair, they weren't objective, and they could do a real harm to specific groups in society depending on what the model is predicting. So as an applied math major, this was a very interesting read for me. And it kind of changed my perspective on a field I might work in one day. And I think it just gave me this mindset that if I go into a field like this, I'll go into it with the goal of improving on the field and preventing, eliminating, and being like conscious of that bias that O'Neill talks about. So I think that's just kind of a perfect example of how Columbia engineers are always being challenged to consider the implications of their work, whether they're more positive or negative, and of course always being encouraged to make their work more positive for real human beings. But engineering for humanity also comes through in the projects and the research that are going on our campus. So next we'll talk a little bit about research, entrepreneurship, and innovation. So starting with research, Columbia funds $1 billion in research every single year. That's billion with a B. So that means there's a lot of research going on our campus, and therefore a lot of ways for undergrads specifically to get involved with research. Because of something called the Student Research Involvement Program, all engineering labs on campus are required to reserve a certain number of seats specifically for undergrads. So you never have to worry about graduate students filling up all those research positions. It really is very possible for undergrads, even first-year students, to get research. Oftentimes it just comes down to emailing a professor whose work you're interested in, maybe getting to know them a little bit, and oftentimes that's enough to get a spot on their project. A friend of mine, Morgan, who's also an applied math major, she did this during her first year on campus. She found out about an applied math professor who was doing work in trying to better understand how we can mathematically model the spread of infectious disease. And all she really had to do was email this professor, and they met and talked a little bit about her interests and background. And then she was able to work on that project as a first-year student. So I think that's really great. Clearly that topic has become very relevant since then. And I think it's great that as, just a freshman in college, she was able to work on something of such significance and such importance. There's also a few initiatives that help students get involved with research. One I'll mention now is SURF, which is the Summer Undergraduate Research Fellowship. This is where students get to live on campus over the summer for 10 weeks and do research with professors, normally in the life sciences, and they get a really generous stipend to do so. So it's just another program that encourages undergrads specifically to do research. Next on the list is entrepreneurship. If you are a budding entrepreneur, that spirit is definitely very alive on our campus, and there's definitely a community for you at Columbia. That shows through in a few programs we have. The first I'll mention is Res Inc. Res Inc. is a living learning community. If you haven't heard of living learning communities, they're essentially places where students who have some shared passion or interest live together, maybe on the same floor. And they go through like a lot of programming and events together related to that shared passion. So in Res Inc., that shared interest is being an entrepreneur. So it's just a great way to live in this environment with people who have similar goals as you or kind of on a similar life path as you. And everyone in Res Inc. is required to currently be working on their own startup. Next, we have the Columbia Startup Lab, which funds 22 student startups every single year, provides them office space downtown in Soho. But the best part about this program is that if the Startup Lab chooses to fund your startup, they don't take any equity from you, which is a very nice perk. And then there's the Columbia Build Lab, which partners Columbia undergrads, engineering undergrads with like technical experience with Columbia MBA students in the business. So that's kind of a great way to work on these business student startups and provide your own like technical expertise to contribute to the company. And then finally, there is our Entrepreneur Club, CORE. They're very active on campus. I see them all the time in our student center, learner hall. A friend of mine, Maddie, actually joined CORE last spring. And before COVID hit, she was planning to go with them over spring break to Germany, where she was going to get to shadow with a bunch of startups there through CORE. So definitely a lot of ways to get involved on campus if you are a budding entrepreneur. Then last on the list, you'll see innovation. I think one of my favorite things about Columbia Engineering is how we're always considering how we can improve ourselves, improve the city around us, improve the world around us. But I think that shows really well through the Makerspace. We celebrated the grand reopening of the Makerspace last spring. The Makerspace is essentially a place that you can go to. It has 3D printers, laser cutters, woodworking machines, sewing machines. There's even some more industrial-looking machines that they recently added that I personally don't know how to use, but definitely a lot of undergraduate students do and are trained in using them. Probably more so the like mechanical engineers than the applied math majors like me. But I think my favorite part about the Makerspace is that it's open to students really for whatever they'd like. So academic projects, personal projects, you don't have to be working on something for class to go there. And most of the basic materials are completely free to students. So a friend of mine, Kat, was absolutely obsessed with the Makerspace last year. She was there probably 3 or 4 days of the week. And sometimes she was just like working on homework with friends. Other times she was doing projects for class. But I'd say most of the time she was just working on her own, fun things for herself. So she 3D printed earrings for a friend of mine around the holidays. She used the woodworking machines to like make her own door sign with her name. So the Makerspace is really just this great place to go where you can learn how to work with some of these machines and tools in a really creative and like low stress way. So in addition to all this research and all these projects that are happening on campus, of course, Columbia students also really like to engage with internships. And New York City is probably one of the best places in the world for a college student to do that. A lot of those internships are found through our Center for Career Education. So the center provides your typical services. They'll look over your resume, your cover letter. They'll do a mock interview with you. They'll loan you professional clothing for an interview if you don't have any. But they also have close connections with some companies that are really popular for students to want to intern or work with. Companies like Google, SpaceX, IBM. I think that shows well through a website they run called Lionshare. Lionshare is essentially a job or internship search website, but it's specifically for Columbia students. So when I log into Lionshare, I see job postings from the companies I just mentioned, really a bunch of employers all over the world. Because they've decided to post on Lionshare, It means they know Columbia, they understand the quality of a Columbia engineering education, and they'd love to have a Columbia engineer specifically intern or work for them. So that's a great way that we find a lot of our internships as engineering students. Then there's something called the Student Internship Program that the center runs. This is a 12-week program every spring. Students in the program get to regularly work with a career counselor on their own professional development, and they get experience working with a variety of startups in New York City. So again, just a really great way to get involved with an internship through the Center for Career Education. Another thing to note is that most Columbia students have Fridays off. It's very uncommon to have a class on a Friday. So that's kind of a great day for you to dedicate to exploring the city. And especially for upperclassmen, that's a great day for you to work in the city. You know, because of our unique circumstances being right in the middle of New York with a subway stop right outside campus and having the time by having those Fridays off, Columbia students really don't have to wait till the summer to have an internship. They can work during the school year as well if they'd like to, and that's pretty common. And then even after graduation, a lot of graduates stay in New York City. They fall in love with the city while they're here. They find work in the area. So of course that provides a lot of opportunities for connections between current students on campus and alumni. And again, that's another source of internships. So because of all these things I've mentioned, 90% of our students have at least one internship before graduation day. Many have way more than that, really up to 4 and 5. So we're definitely getting that working experience before we graduate. So now we'll pause here for our Q&A.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. That was great. Folks, continue to send in your questions through the Q&A feature on Zoom. We've had some great questions so far. But just to get us started, I was wondering if anyone wanted to speak to what are the opportunities for something like study abroad as an engineer. I think we've heard about some really great opportunities in terms of research and internships and classroom experiences, but do our engineers study abroad? Can you get engineering experience abroad if you do go abroad? Max, would you feel comfortable kicking us off on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I'm maybe not the best one to ask because if I would have gone abroad, it would have been this year. But it was definitely something I was considering beforehand. It's totally possible. We have partnerships with lots of really on all continents. People who in the past have studied abroad in Europe, in South America, in Asia, Australia. So it does involve a lot of planning if you're an engineer because you have to find an equivalent course elsewhere. But if you do it your second semester of your sophomore year, it's a lot easier to find an equivalent course to a general technical requirement than maybe an upper level major specific course. So as long as you're prudent about it and you meet with your advisor, and there are special advisors for study abroad programs, it's definitely possible as an engineer. And we do have partnerships with some amazing programs around the world.
Yeah, thank you so much, Max. I don't know if Emily or Caitlin, if either of you were planning on studying abroad at some point, or if you have friends, maybe current seniors who were able to go abroad before all of this happened in the last year or so.
I don't plan on studying abroad just because I think I miss Columbia so much. But I do have friends who plan to study abroad. And like Max was saying, they've just kind of had to start talking to their advisors pretty early about it. I think the other great thing is that because engineers at Columbia have a good amount of humanities requirements, sometimes those classes are a little bit easier to take abroad, a little bit more transferable. I think we have a study abroad program like specifically for core classes like art humanities, music humanities in Paris, I believe. So I think a lot of engineers also choose to like save up some of their humanities courses and choose to do that abroad. So I think that's another way that like it makes it possible for engineers at Columbia to study abroad when oftentimes people think, oh, I can't study abroad if I'm an engineering student in college.
Yeah, and actually that Arts Humanities and Music Humanities program, also there is a version that runs in Berlin, Germany as well. Very cool. We do have a quick question in the chat about the application process. That will depend on the kind of program that you're looking to do. If you're applying through a fellowship at Columbia or if you're applying to a program at a peer. We have a great office on campus called the Office of Undergraduate Global Engagement. with some really great dedicated advisors who are there to help you figure out every step of the way of that study abroad process. One other thing I will note with Columbia is that we are very fortunate to be able to allow our financial aid to travel with you on abroad. So it will never cost you more to be abroad for the semester than it would be to attend Columbia for that semester on campus. So that's just a couple of the logistical things about the study abroad process. I think what Max and Caitlin said about planning early is especially important when thinking about that. We have another great question about what the workload really looks like for engineering students. Emily, do you want to kick us off on that one?
Yeah, sure. I would definitely start off by just saying that each student's workload and everything else, like the clubs and work itself, is really up to like the individual themselves. Typically, students will take 5 classes each semester. And then, you have opportunities to work, if you have like work study or get like a part-time job around campus or off campus. If you're interested, in getting involved in the community and in clubs and whatnot, like those also take time, especially if you take like on leadership roles and anything like that. But I definitely think it is manageable. All of the workload, all of the professors and the TAs are here to support you whenever it does feel stressful. And there's a lot of faculty outside of the classroom, whether it's psychological services or talking with your advisor, like, I'm really having a hard time with this class. Is there any way that maybe I can seek their class that might seem a little overwhelming compared to like high school classes and whatnot. So definitely it is manageable. In my personal experience, it's definitely more than high school, but that's to be expected. So yeah, definitely manageable, but knowing what resources you need to support you is essential to be successful.
I think that's a lot of really great advice. Max, do you have anything you want to add to that, or Caitlin as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot of work, but also keep in mind that we're engineers, and if you're going to school to learn how to build bridges and you don't work very hard at it, and then you build a bad bridge, it can collapse, and that would be a disaster. So it's certainly worthwhile. I know personally as a computer science major, I might not be building bridges, but I'm solving problems. I'm studying theoretical computer science specifically, so a lot of what I do focuses on like the underlying math and algorithms, and it can be a lot of work, but it's absolutely worthwhile given that if I look at my abilities now compared to when I actually got to Columbia, I think I'm just a much more dynamic problem solver. I can work very effectively in groups. Group work is huge here. You're always collaborating with your peers. And I've also just learned a lot that I didn't know beforehand. And that's not to say that everyone, even within but it's certainly not for nothing. There's a good reason why.
Okay, I think Max is cutting in and out just a tiny bit. I think we got most of that answer. Caitlin, do you have anything else that you want to just add on there?
Yeah, just want to second both what Emily and Max said. I think, of course, it is a good amount of work, but if you consider all the resources that are available to you, and again, collaboration, like Max mentioned, is huge at Columbia, and that really, I think, takes some of the stress off of this work. It really is very manageable and very possible to get things done. I think it's also, a matter of your priorities. You kind of get to choose in college what you want to focus on and stress the most about. And if for you that's like clubs and internships and research as opposed to classes, then like that's fine in college. So I think it's really up to you to like set your schedule, set your priorities. And there's absolutely no reason that your courses need to be like overbearingly in your schedule or incredibly stressful at Columbia.
I think all of that was 3 great perspectives on this. We do have a quick question in the Q&A feature on Zoom about whether you can apply to both the engineering school and Columbia College. Unfortunately, you cannot. You may only apply to either Columbia College or Columbia Engineering when you submit an application to Columbia for undergraduate. However, if you decide partway through your first year that you would actually be much happier studying something offered in the other school, you do have the ability to do an internal transfer. But really think critically about the areas of study that are offered at the engineering school versus at Columbia College. There's only 3 areas of study that are shared between the two, and those are going to be applied mathematics, applied physics, and computer science. Those departments are essentially the same between Columbia College and Columbia Engineering. And if you are potentially interested in one of those, really think about what the engineering core curriculum is going to look like versus the Columbia College core curriculum. I think Caitlin brought up a lot about the kinds of students and the kinds of work that you do at Columbia Engineering that really thrive, and the kinds of things that you should enjoy if you're going to be at Columbia Engineering. So I'd really use that when you're us up into our next question. We had a question about what Greek life is like for engineering students. I think that's actually a great question to think more broadly about what is the interaction with engineering students and the rest of the undergraduate population at Columbia, specifically Columbia College. So let's go reverse order this time. Caitlin, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit, not necessarily Greek life unless you participate in that, but what is the social scene like between Columbia College and Columbia Engineering?
Yeah, I always like to say that like I interact with my friends in Columbia Engineering the same way I interact with my friends in Columbia College. Like there really is no divide between the two schools other than what you're choosing to study, what you're majoring in. It's really no different than being friends with someone in your school with a different major. And like I said during the presentation, you live with Columbia College students, you use the same dining halls, you're on the same campus. Really everything is the same other than the courses you take. So I'd say there's definitely no divide there. I'd say my friends are equally Columbia Engineering and Columbia College students. And I think that's something that is really special about Columbia, and just generally studying engineering at a school that has such an interdisciplinary focus. I think sometimes I learn the most and have the most fun during my conversations with friends from Columbia College. So I do think that's like a benefit that we have as engineers, that we get to interact with people who have very different interests than us.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, that really the courses are what separates the Columbia College and Columbia Engineering students. And even sometimes you'll take the same courses. Things like music humanities and arts humanities, you're going to be mixed in with your Columbia College peers. Max, do you have anything you'd like to add? Emily as well, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I'm not personally involved in Greek life, although I know many engineers who are. So it's certainly a possibility. Just with regards to student life as a whole, Columbia Engineering and Columbia College are absolutely adjunct to them and some adjunct to each other. And sometimes the distinction isn't even there. I've taken many classes with students in Columbia College, and as a computer science major, there are some Columbia College students taking the same like engineering technical courses that I am. The difference, of course, is the two cores that you take.
Yeah, I would just add to that by saying that even like students,
Did I freeze?
Just for a second there.
My Wi-Fi is kind of spotty.
Don't worry,
Yeah, I'm sorry about this, I guess.
You see.
Yeah, I'll let Emily go just until my Wi-Fi stabilizes.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, I was just going to add that we have like 4 schools at Columbia, Columbia Engineering, and then we have the General Studies School and our Women's School, Barnard. So even across all 4 schools, we definitely interact with each other, especially in clubs. I play women's rugby, and all 4 schools are represented. So I think it's a really great way to build community and stuff. And I see that there's a question in the chat talking about like, do students in the college and in engineering live together? Definitely. My roommate in my first year was an international student. She was studying economics, and we really learned a lot from each other. So definitely we're living with each other, taking the same classes, eating together in the same clubs, have the same passions. So yeah, we all are all mixed in this and together.
Oops, I missed my mute button there for a second. Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone. We have a couple questions about minoring in Columbia College or an area outside of specifically the engineering school. That is 100% possible. Caitlin mentioned that you have the opportunity to minor in a number of subjects, including 15 in the engineering school and 22 through Columbia College, which includes a wide variety of arts, humanities, social sciences, business. There's a special concentration that you'll be able to take part in. So just for the sake of completion, that is the kind of idea on that. We also have some questions about applications. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in this session today. please feel free to continue sending in your questions, but I would like to ask a question of my own to the student panelists. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your interactions with professors. I think we heard a lot about some really cool professors at Columbia Engineering, some opportunities to do research with professors, but just in your general average lecture course, what are your professors like? Or do you have the ability to actually interact with them? How often are they actually teaching you? I think we'll just keep going back and forth. So Emily, if you want to start with this one.
Yeah, I would definitely say that professors are incredibly accessible and always here to support you in whatever you need. In your first year, a lot of the classes are lectures just because you're trying to get, everybody else is trying to get their general educations out of the way so that when you break out into your departments and stuff and in your majors, you kind of like have really honed down on those like foundational concepts and whatnot. But definitely, I think they're always ready to answer your questions, whether it's just like foundations, like, I don't know why this is how it is, or if it's like deeper and like, how does this apply to da 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 da. They're really passionate about what they're teaching, so that really comes out in how they teach and the conversations that you have in their office hours. I always talk about how like when you email a professor, they normally respond within like a day or two, compared to like in my high school experience, I would see these teachers every day and like it would take like weeks for them to answer. So definitely professors, TAs, all faculty is here to support you and very accessible.
Awesome. And then Max, what's your experience been?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that I'm a TA. I've done it for 4 semesters now, and I'm about to do it this summer, so I guess that'll be 5. And I've found that TAing is really one of the best ways to get to know your professors. I've built like personal relationships with really all of them, especially 2 come to mind, and they've just been invaluable mentors for me. They're really, really incredible people who have much more experience than I do, and they're able to guide me not only through Columbia, but through my professional career and through any graduate degrees that I'm considering. And I'm very, very grateful that I've gotten to know them and I've been able to be mentored by them. So I think opportunities for professors for interaction with professors are definitely there. It might be a bit challenging if you come from a small high school like I did, where everyone knew everyone on a first name basis when you get to your first large lecture. But definitely with time, you will be able to forge those connections with your professors and get some good advice.
Awesome. And then Caitlin, just to round us out there.
Sure. I guess I just definitely agree with Emily and Max that professors are very accessible. And in my experience going to office hours, they've always been incredibly down to earth and like eager to help me. I think they are very passionate about the subjects they're teaching. But I think Columbia also offers a few programs that like facilitate those interactions between students and professors, especially in those like bigger lecture style classes. They have something called the faculty lunch program where professors can choose to have lunch with like 10 to 20 students in the faculty house, which makes very great food. And a lot of my professors, my first semester, my second semester, my bigger lecture style introductory courses, they did this a few times a semester, and I was able to go to a few of them. And the one that comes to mind was with Professor Parkin, he was my general chemistry professor. He's done a lot of really amazing research on campus. And he also actually won an award in mentoring from former President Obama a few years ago. There was like pictures of them together at the White House when he received the award. So it was cool that like I got to sit down and have lunch with this professor and really get to know him on more of like a personal basis when he is so accomplished and like so well known on and off campus.
Great. I think we have time for just one more question before we talk a tiny bit about admissions. And I was wondering if everyone just wanted to quickly share how you decided on your major and what that process is like as an engineering student. So I think we'll just go back the other way again. So Caitlin, how did you come to applied math?
Yeah, so I think when I was, decided to go to Columbia, I was looking at all the departments and I said, oh, applied math, that sounds like right up my alley. And that was always the plan. And then I got to Columbia and I heard about other departments and I was like, what's industrial engineering? That also sounds very much something I would enjoy. So I think I just kind of took a second. I read up on the departments. I took courses that would kind of introduce me to those different departments. I also think the art of engineering was very helpful for me. I listened closely during those lectures from the professor from the Industrial Engineering and Operations Research Department, and then the professor from the Applied Math and Applied Physics Department. And I think that kind of was really like what sealed the deal for me. I think I just, felt that I'd be a better fit for Applied Math, and it was more what I was really interested in doing for the rest of my life. So I think that's kind of how I came to the decision. My other advice is just to like keep an eye on your emails, on like posters in your residence halls during the first, few weeks of school, around major declaration during the fall of your sophomore year. There's a lot of clubs that will host events to kind of like give you a chance to mingle with students, upperclassmen from different majors. You can kind of like get to talk to people who are really already further in those majors and get to hear like from the student experience, which I think is also helpful.
Awesome. And then Max.
Yeah, I definitely didn't have a straight path to computer science. I came to Columbia thinking I wanted to study chemical engineering and work on nuclear fusion and give the world like clean renewable energy that was really efficient. I really liked my first semester chemistry class, but I was not at all a fan of the physics class that I took. So I said, okay, maybe I should start looking for other things. So I took Intro to Electrical Engineering my second semester, and I really enjoyed that. And at the same time, I was taking computer science, and I really enjoyed kind of like the algorithmic problem solving and the logic that was involved in that. And I said, okay, I really like the electrical engineering side of things. I really like computer science. I'll do computer engineering because that's a good combination of the two. You do declare during your sophomore fall, so I declared a computer engineering major. And then I got into a theoretical computer science course that was really all the parts of computer science I liked, and even had some intersection with electrical engineering in ways that I didn't necessarily expect. And it just really encompassed the part of computer science that I found fascinating. Whereas computer engineering also covered a lot of other things that are interesting in their own right, but weren't necessarily for me. So I filled out, I think it was 1 or 2 forms, and within 24 hours I had switched my major, and I'm really glad that I picked computer science.
That's great to hear that even if you do make an initial decision, you do have the ability to go back and revise that, and it's not too arduous a process. Emily, do you want to close us out?
Yeah, I would definitely, everybody has their own path to their major. I've known that I wanted to do mechanical engineering since I was like in 7th grade. I didn't even know what it was, but I had this teacher in middle school that was like, you should look into it when you're older. And I'm like, sure. So definitely like that's been a passion of mine. I like seeing how different systems work with each other to create like an overall system. That's just like my type of personality, I guess. I like seeing each step, and I like knowing what's explicitly going on. So I think it's important to kind of realize that when making your choice in your major, like what do you actually like and what works for you, and like what's comfortably challenging for you as well. But even like with my concentration, I didn't come in knowing what I wanted. I know that I wanted to specialize in something, but not really sure of what with what. So through the art of engineering class that Caitlin was talking about earlier, I was like, yeah, electrical engineering, that sounds like a really good match with mechanical engineering. Seems like a very practical life choice. And then I took a electrical engineering course, and I was like, no, this is not for me. Not really a big fan. I don't know what's going on, and I don't like it. So I changed that to earth and environmental engineering, and kind of working with that, and I really enjoyed it. So it's okay to kind of play around with different things, play around with different combinations, know that it's normal and that everybody also is doing it. And just know that everybody's here to support you to kind of find your passions, and you can do that through clubs or in classes, talking with professors, just all of that good stuff.
Thank you all so much for sharing your experiences with the group today. I certainly learned a lot listening to your answers at the Q&A, and I'm sure our visitors did as well. I'm going to transition us now to one more slide to talk about applying to college as an engineer. This is about Columbia engineering, but also it's things to keep in mind when you're going through your college search process more broadly. There are a lot of things to keep in mind, including what school you want to apply to, how to craft your application, and how to put yourself in the best spot possible with your preparation now in high school. So the first thing I want to talk about is the institution type. And just as a reminder, before I get too far into this, we won't be able to go into detail about our entire admissions and financial aid process here at Columbia. Please, please, please sign up for a general information session if you are interested in hearing more about the general undergraduate experience at Columbia College and Columbia Engineering, and hearing a lot more about our application process in detail. But just transitioning to some of these brief tips, institution type is something that you really want to keep in mind when you're figuring out where you want to apply to. Some colleges might offer engineering as a major under their general college, while others like Columbia have an entire school dedicated to multiple engineering majors with very specific things that they do and research and take courses in. As an applicant for Columbia, again, you will apply directly to the School of Engineering and Applied Science. And as Caitlin said, this means you're going to have your technical requirements in the Columbia Engineering Core as well as our humanities requirements. So our engineering students at Columbia specifically, perhaps a little bit unique from a lot of other engineering schools, you'll tend to have really well-rounded interests and you'll tend to take classes in a number of different fields rather than just strictly engineering and applied math and science. The other thing you want to think about is now as a student in high school and also making sure that when you are applying to colleges that you are setting yourself up for success. Many universities, including Columbia, strongly recommend, and some might even require, that you have coursework in both physics and calculus in high school before starting an engineering program. Faculty in engineering schools have confirmed that these skills are really important in terms of building blocks for an engineering degree, and students without this foundational knowledge might have a difficult time transitioning to that engineering course load as college students. Columbia and other institutions that are highly selective, we're generally going to be looking to see some higher levels of physics and calculus that are available to you if possible. Now, some students might not necessarily have lots of advanced calculus and math and physics classes available to them at high school. That is okay. All colleges and admissions officers will have access to the courses available at your particular high school, so you will not be penalized for taking courses that were simply never available to you, and you won't be compared to students who may have gone to schools where they were offered multiple levels of advanced mathematics. But we are looking to see that you are exploring those areas as much as possible, whether that is renting out a calculus textbook from your local library or enrolling in a free online course to get an introduction to physics if you don't have that as an option at your school. And the final thing is, when you're going through your application, we really want to make sure that you're showcasing your STEM interests and your STEM skills, because that's what you're going to be doing as an engineering student. We want to see that that is there, that you're nurturing it, and that's something that you are legitimately very interested in and passionate about. So this might be something that we see in your activities. Most college applications will ask for an open-ended list for you to include anything that you do outside of the classroom, which might be a school club or a team like robotics, or maybe it's a hobby like tinkering and building computers or even sewing your own clothes at school. We want to see students that like to make things and are really tactile and are invested in kind of the practical applications of things. Almost all college applications similarly, and at Columbia specifically, will ask you for letters of recommendation. And for engineering students, it is highly recommended that you have at least one from a core math or science teacher in high school. We want to hear from a teacher who can speak to how you think critically, how you problem solve, how you do in the areas of math and science. You might also have more formal experiences like research or internships, which are a great way for you to understand your future career path. You can even bring an additional letter of recommendation from a research mentor or an employer, submit a research abstract if you have that, but also understand that we know not every student has access to these sorts of opportunities, especially in this past year with the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic situation. So we're not going to hold that against anyone for not having it. But if you do have these experiences, make sure to showcase them. They're a really great way to show that you have taken the time to really explore what engineering looks like and what you're interested in. And then finally, for Columbia, we're going to have some specific questions on the Columbia application that are unique to us. And one of the ones that we will ask is, why are you interested in engineering? This is your chance to really articulate your interest in pursuing an engineering degree or even in a particular major field. The other part of the Columbia application that's a little bit unique is a list section where we ask you for books, podcasts, movies, concerts, museums, really any sort of media or outside thing besides your schoolwork that you've engaged with. And it's a great way for us to see if you are a good fit for our engineering curriculum. If you've engaged with any sort of engineering resources, whether that is a podcast or, Wired magazine or a blog that you really like to frequent, please list them. It's a great way for us to see how you're exploring your engineering interests in your own time. And the final thing that I want to say that I did allude to previously is that at Columbia, we use a holistic review process, which means we are really trying to understand the student as a whole. There is no cutoff or upper bound of the sort of statistics that you might think of when you're looking at college applications, but also our students are much more than a single number. And we're also understanding you in your own personal context. So like I was saying, we're not going to expect you to have taken courses or done internships that simply were not available to you where you live or at your high school. We really do look to understand an applicant in their full personhood and in their full interests and academic talents and abilities. So rest assured that there is no single make or break piece of the application, that we want to know what interests you, what makes you passionate, as well as things like your transcript and your teacher recommendations. Now, we're going to move on to one more Q&A for a few more minutes. This is still an opportunity to ask our wonderful student panelists questions about student life and being an engineering student and their majors if you'd like, but I'm also here to answer questions about admissions if you have those as well. So please continue to put those into the Q&A. We do have a question here that's been sitting for a little bit about what a good application for Columbia Engineering looks like. And while there is no single application that is most successful or any sort of form that works for everyone, I will say that something that's really important to keep in mind is what Caitlin was talking about and the types of students that do really well at Columbia Engineering, some of the animating ethos of the school, such as research and entrepreneurship and internships, thinking about something like the engineering core curriculum, where you're also going to be taking liberal arts courses. I think proving that you're a good fit, and not necessarily proving, but showing us that you're interested in Columbia specifically for all those things that make Columbia Engineering a very unique engineering experience, really helps students stand out in the application pool. We also have a question about the differences in applying to Columbia College and Columbia Engineering. The application process is going to be almost identical. What we said before about how we would like one of your teacher recommendations to come from a math or science teacher is one of the differences. And the second difference is we will ask you why are you interested in engineering specifically, whereas we ask our Columbia College applicants why they are interested in their particular major or intended area of study. So it is the exact same process. Our applicants are evaluated in the exact same way. One school is not easier to get into than the other. They have essentially the exact same admissions rate if that is what you're interested in, but the process is almost identical except for that teacher recommendation portion. We have a question about switching majors at Columbia Engineering. Max actually spoke about that earlier. Max, I don't know if you want to just dive into that a little bit deeper. Did you have conversations with your advisor? What did those forms look like? How long did it take? I think maybe that'll help with this question.
I mean, essentially, one of the biggest misconceptions I got back in the past life when I would give tours on campus, is that whatever you put on your Common App has any bearing once you get to campus. Regardless of what you put on your Common App, you come into Columbia undecided. You do not declare your major until your first semester of your sophomore year, and you cannot declare your major before then. Once you declare it, you have to fill out a form where you get your advising dean's approval, who is essentially just someone who oversees your degree progress checklist, and then you need the department that you're switching to sign off and say they can reasonably complete the major given how much time they have left. It's that simple. It took about like 24 or 48 hours. So no decision you make is binding, and you absolutely cannot make a binding decision before your first semester of your sophomore year, even if you wanted to. So it was definitely not much of a hassle.
Thank you, Max. And I think that is a really good point that, and this is true for both Columbia Engineering and Columbia College students, if anyone walks away deciding that they'd rather attend Columbia College. You do not have to stick to anything that you tell us on the Common application or the Coalition application or the QuestBridge application. We are just looking to understand what your areas of interest are as part of getting to know you, what you're passionate about. You are not held to any of those answers once you are on campus, and you are able to register for whatever types of courses you would like. We have another question about the internships, research, and job opportunities that are available to undergraduates. We did talk about this quite a bit, or Caitlin talked about this quite a bit, but how about for the panel, if you want to mention either an internship, a research opportunity that you personally have done, or maybe your favorite one that one of your friends has done, just so we can get an idea of the wide range of opportunities available to our Columbia engineering students. Emily, do you feel comfortable kicking us off on this one?
Yeah, so I would definitely start off by saying that just because we're in the engineering school doesn't mean that all of your internships or job opportunities have to be engineering related. Like personally, I'm really into building communities and working in schools and stuff. Like even though that's not directly related to engineering, that's one of my passions. So some job opportunities that I've had is working with high school students and tutoring them in geometry, and going to some local elementary schools in Harlem and teaching them basic arithmetic and learning how to read. So those are like some opportunities that I've been engaged with. But like Caitlin mentioned earlier, in like the general info session, there are a lot of opportunities for research. A lot of students get involved throughout the year and during the summer. And students can even start in the summer before their first year at Columbia. So really you can do research throughout all 4 years if that's something that you're interested in, and it's really easy to get involved with as well.
Great, and I think that's such a good point that just because you're in the engineering school does not mean you are limited in any way to just specifically engineering opportunities or even research. Caitlin, do you have any opportunities that you'd like to just kind of shout out?
Sure. So I'm kind of going through the internship application process right now, but I guess I can talk a little bit about like how the Center for Career Education has helped me through that, and how helpful they've been. I think quite a few months ago I went for like my first meeting, and I just like read all the bios of all the career counselors and said, okay, I want to have a meeting with this one. And she just kind of gave me like this very thorough checklist of things that I should be doing, things that like I had never even thought about, and gave me a lot of just like general advice on like networking, like how to make the most of Lionshare, how to use your LinkedIn properly, like things I really had never even thought about. And then, you know, throughout application season, like if I have a specific resume or cover letter that I'm sending out, like I can have a meeting with her again. They have like quick meetings that you can go to, I think on Fridays, where you can just go in, I think it's called Quick Questions, for 15 minutes and just like ask your question, have someone quickly look over your resume. So they are incredibly accessible to students. I have a friend who meets with the same career counselor like once every 2 weeks. And she's just been like, you know, like guiding her through the internship application process. So I definitely say there's like a lot of support for you going through that.
Awesome. And then Max, we actually have someone who would love to hear more about your computer science research, if you want to speak on that opportunity.
Yeah, so the research that I had previously done was in the wireless and mobile networking lab on computer networking and 5G, specifically on the Cosmos testbed platform that they're building for 5G infrastructure in West Harlem, which is where Columbia is located. Essentially what I did was I analyzed a lot of data and tried to find potential vulnerabilities in the 5G network, and I really enjoyed it, although networks as a whole just are not a topic that I'm passionate about. However, I am, after taking a bit more coursework, I realized that I really like algorithms, I really like game theory. Machine learning is very interesting to me. So I'm now pursuing research opportunities, potentially starting as soon as this summer, in those topics. And all you really have to do is email professors. And at this point, because I've gotten to know professors, it's very easy for me to say, oh yeah, this professor could recommend me, and that carries a lot of weight. So it's definitely very possible to find research.
And we only have just under 2 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we are respecting everyone's time. So I think just to close things out, if everyone on the panel would share why they chose Columbia Engineering, maybe why they chose engineering, why specifically at Columbia, the unique parts of the school that really stood out to you. I think that'd be a nice way to wrap things up. Caitlin, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I think when I was looking at engineering schools as like a high school senior, I really wanted to go to an engineering school that like not just allowed, but really encouraged me to continue to take humanities courses. I've always loved my like English and social studies courses. And I think Columbia really was that school. I think there's something really special about requiring engineering students to like continue to take those humanities courses. I think like being in that kind of academic environment, it just like forces you to never forget about like the human effects of the work that you're doing. I think if you were just going to take like strictly technical courses throughout college, it would be like really easy to forget about like the societal impact of the things you're learning about. And I think like Columbia Engineering, that really is just like our philosophy, engineering for humanity. And that was something that I really related to and something I really wanted in an engineering school. So that's why I chose Columbia.
Emily?
Yeah, I would just say that the biggest reason why I decided to come to Columbia was all of the resources available for students. Being a first generation low income student, that was one of the biggest things for me. What type of support systems and resources can my institutions support me with? So coming to Columbia, there are a lot of communities for students who have similar backgrounds as me, and knowing that there are students who come from those backgrounds and are successful and go on to do great things is really inspiring to me. I'd also say like the financial aid is incredible, like our admissions officer mentioned, so that's always very helpful to my family. And coming from California, this is like a nice little tale about how Columbia really wants us to be successful and is looking out for us. When we first had snow, I had no idea what snow was not prepared, but through the Dean's Assistant Fund, Columbia gave me a couple $100s to kind of go out and buy winter clothing so that I wasn't freezing and was able to focus on my studies and everything that I needed to accomplish. So definitely the resources are here to help us be successful and help us stay healthy and all that.
And Max, to close us out for the day.
Cool. So I'm actually from very nearby. I was born at Columbia Presbyterian, funny enough, and my original goal in high school was to get as far away from home as I could. So I looked at schools all over the country, but really not in the Northeast, and especially not in New York. And then one of my teachers in high school who was familiar with the school because he worked as an adjunct said, I think you would really like Columbia Engineering. I just think you would really fit well there. I said, yeah, it looks cool, but it's way too close. So no way. Then he told my mom at their parent-teacher conference, and my hands were kind of tied. So I begrudgingly agreed to come look at Columbia. And once I got here, I was just kind of taken aback by the opportunities for personal growth that it afforded, both in and outside the classroom. I mean, obviously the education speaks for itself, both technically and within the humanities. I really don't think you'll find a better combination of them anywhere. Education, also the great technical education, and then the opportunities for personal growth, being in New York City, being with such a diverse community, and just like you learn so much from peers here. It was an amazing choice. I'm so lucky that I go to Columbia, even in this online format. I still consider myself incredibly fortunate. And I hope you guys, I wish you all the best of luck throughout this process, and I really think Columbia is an amazing place.
I think that is a great note for us to end this session on. Thank you so much to all of our student presenters, and thank you to everyone watching tonight for joining our introduction to Columbia Engineering. We hope that the information provided tonight was helpful to you and that you continue to learn more about the university by connecting with us on social media, by attending additional virtual events. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day, evening, morning, wherever you may be. Thanks so much, folks.